So there's 5 different ways that I wanted to show you how to make new plants from old. The first one is cuttings from a branching plant like this. The second is taking a cutting off a runner. The third one is dividing up clumps of plants. The fourth one is actually taking a cutting from a rhizome or a clumping plant. And the fourth one is doing some propagation of some water plants. The first type of propagation I'd like to show you is the cutting method, and so that is something that you use for a branching plant. A branching plant is like this hibiscus, or it could be rosemary or lavender, basil, all those sorts of plants that have a main stem and then obviously the branches, and so it's a branch cutting. And what you're looking for is to take a cutting just below a node. Now a node is where the leaves are coming out, and so you snip off the lower leaves here. And I always chop it just below a node because anything below that is going to rot and there's no point having it there. New roots are going to come out from where these nodes are. So you get new roots from here, new roots from here. So I typically snip off the leaves up to about half or a third of the cutting. So you have at least 2 to 3 nodes that you can put into the ground or into a pot. Now if you wanted to, you can also snip off a few extra leaves, because the thing is, since you've disconnected it from the main plant, it's going to get a bit stressed out until it gets new roots happening. There's 2 different things you can do with this. You can either put this into some water until you get some roots, or quite often what I do, if the soil is prepared, you can just put it straight into the garden. And that's what I've done with all of these cranberry hibiscuses, and I often do it with lavenders and rosemaries and, like I said, basils too. So that's the cutting method. The second type of propagation I wanted to show you was that of division, and this is something that you can use for clumping plants like garlic chives, like lemongrass, onions, leeks, things that throw multiple shoots up from the same point. So I'm going to show you how to do garlic chives. So this is a really healthy clump of society garlic that I planted some time ago now, but just one shoot, and as you can see it's now probably 100 shoots of garlic chives in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently put my fork underneath and prise it up, just gently pulling it out like this. And you don't have to necessarily take up the whole clump. You can just take off a side section here. There we go, there we are. So I'm going to leave the rest of that in the soil there, and that can bunch out again. Now, see how here there's a whole lot of little shoots that are all clustered together. Now my task now is to try and gently prise these apart so that each stalk has some roots attached to it. So as you can see, each one of the separate stalks has its own set of roots and leaves. And what we'll do with this is we'll get a bit of haircut. So I tend to chop it off about here, and then this is what I plant back into the ground. So I plant it up to about here, and then within a week there'll be new shoots coming back out of there. And from this one clump I could get 100 plants, and even just from this little chunk that I got off the side I at least have 20 plants. So that's a wonderful new hedge along the edge of my garden that I can create, or that I can pot up and give to friends. The third type of propagation method that I wanted to show you was taking cuttings from runners. Now runners are typically things like mints, and you'll also see strawberries throwing out runners, oregano. So a lot of different herbs have that creeping type of tendency. So what you want to do with a runner is to try and get a segment of it that has enough nodes so that when you put it in the ground again, it will be able to throw roots out of those new nodes. So this is Vietnamese mint here, and it's a very vigorous runner. And when you pull up a section of it, you can see underneath there's lots of nodes. Now each one of these nodes is where the leaves come out, but it's also where roots will come out when it touches the ground. So all I need to do to take a cutting of this runner is to take a snip of this section, remove the leaves, and then what I would do is I'd plant it in the ground like this, sideways, so that This is underground, and each one of those becomes a new spot for getting some good roots. And just have a little snip going up the top. And that's it. That's all you need to do to get a runner re-sprouted. And so you can, from this plant here, you can see how many, possibly hundreds of plants I could get from just one plant. So the idea of propagating gives you an enormous abundance potential. Once you have one plant, if you understand the different forms of different plants, you can start to propagate them all throughout your garden and to share them, or to take cuttings from friends' gardens and bring them into your own. The fourth sort of propagation that I wanted to show you was that of dividing up a plant that has rhizomes or corms. Now, one of the ones that I've got here in front of me is yacon. Other plants could be daylilies or anything that has bulbs underneath the ground. Another one I've got beside me too is edible canna. So I wanted to show you the two of those. This plant here is yacon, or Peruvian ground apple, and it grows from tubers. It grows tubers underground from kind of like a crown-like top, and it's just started to sprout again this year. But what I wanted to show you is I can divide this up and spread it further around the garden. I've got my fork gently underneath and I'm prising it up. It comes out very easily. Now you can kind of see here how there's many different shoots coming out, both quite a substantial one, but then also lots of little ones. So the idea is to essentially just gently pull them apart like this, off that main stalk, and each of them has roots like this too. So underneath here, oh, you can already see this is a yacon, a Peruvian ground apple, just beginning. This is going to get absolutely massive. It's like an apple. Here in the subtropics, we can't grow apples, so we grow things like this, Peruvian ground apples. So, and you can see here how there's a bit of a crown that's formed, and each of these is where new shoots comes from. So if we can divide these up, there's one, there's another little baby one here. We'll take that little section off. And as long as it's got roots on it, we can plant it out. So from that one little section here, I think I've probably got about 20. This is the base of edible canna, or Queensland arrowroot, Canna edulis. And as you can see, this from the ground, underneath the ground, there'll be the roots, but this just sits on the top. So you can pull up a section like this and just basically snap that off and plant that. See, it has a little bit of root there, and see this little point here? That's going to grow into a new kind of corm on the side, and that will become a new canna bulb that you can actually eat. So you just snap that bit off, take it into the kitchen and leave this main bit in the ground, and then that will then throw up new leaves as well, and it'll become its own clump. And in a year you can come up and dig it and you'll get maybe 20 off this one. So I have a few here that I can break off. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 from just this one little section, and as you can see inside here, this is what we use as the potato alternative here in the subtropics. Not when it's got the shoots growing out of it, but when they've just come out new, and before they throw the shoots out, they make beautiful, beautiful potato alternatives. So that's how you propagate, again, from this kind of rhizome base. And that's the fourth propagation method. The fifth sort of propagation that I wanted to show you was that of propagating a water plant. Now the water plant that I have here is a zola. Now I'll show you down close here. Now what it is, it's actually a floating fern. Now how this propagates is that if you take some sections of that and put that into water, it will then divide up and start to create a whole lot of new plants, and before you know it, your next bucket of water will also be filled with this plant. Now this is a great plant for putting in a pond, for covering it up to stop mosquitoes from coming in. It's also a great plant for creating beautiful compost. But so I just wanted to show you quickly how easy it is to propagate this. So you just get a little section out of one bucket and then just start it off in the next one. Now I will feed this a little bit of compost too, just to give it a bit of nutrients, but within a few weeks this bucket will be covered. So I have a constant source of azolla, which I can use for composting all through my garden. So as you can see, Water plants are quite abundant, so what you need to be careful of is whether whether there's something that you need to be looking out for as a potential weed. So always check with your local authority to see whether this one's on the declared list or not. Like many water plants, they're so abundant and so useful, but you do need to take care. So be a responsible gardener and check first.